Hello, everybody, and welcome to probably the last episode of the LeanTossup CDL betting podcast for this season, at least. Um, Obviously, next season we'll start up back again with this, but yeah, this is probably it for the 2021 CDL season. So I'm joined, of course, as always, by CDL Metrics. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, we have just a few matches left, four to be exact, with this second season of the COD League. So sad to see it come to an end. We should have some really, really good matchups to watch over the weekend, though. And yeah, we're getting some news about the next COD, which is exciting. I know we'll get into that a little bit a little later in the pod, but yeah, season two is wrapping up. It flew by, and soon enough, the new COD is going to come out, and we'll hopefully have more COD League in, fingers crossed, maybe December, January. I hope it starts a little earlier than February like this season did. But yeah, it's an exciting time, but also a little bit of a sad time to see it end.
For sure, yeah, and again, this happens every year, right? We're always like, "Oh, this is so exciting," and then it ends, and we're like, "Oh, that's really sad." But I mean, again, all good things have to come to an end at some point, and this year has been really good. It's definitely better than last year. I mean, last couple days I had to stay up doing some work late, and I was rewatching last year's champs, which was actually technically my first champs. I never actually seen a Call of Duty champ, so I'm like, "Oh, this is cool." But like in comparison, like no, that was like actually terrible. Like there's no
Yeah.
fans, everything was online. They weren't even together in the same room. It was so weird. Like based on the product we're seeing now, where even when they were off like online, they were still all mostly in like team settings, right? And they were still able to interact with each other, and we had content and stuff. But like back then, that was just not a thing, right? And it's good that we're back to that now, and it's definitely a better product, and it keeps improving. And while it's not where we want it to be yet, and I think it might not be, it's not back to CWL level yet, and but it's getting there. And I think kind of the nice thing about teaming up, having it with the basically bought out by Activision, I think is the fact that not only will we eventually get back to CWL, but we'll get better than it. And I think we're better. We're gonna get better than it in some ways, soon in the future too. So going just focusing on this year here for a second. As you mentioned, 4 games left. First off, tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern, Dallas versus Atlanta phase in the winter bracket final. Then we have the losers semis, then we have the losers final, and then Sunday we have just the grand championship in the final, in which also on that day uh, they will be demoing Call of Duty Vanguard multiplayer. So I am really excited for that. That seems like a really cool thing to do. It's a great way to kind of cross pollinate between the different players of COD. So you basically get your mix your pros with the people who just kind of want to play. Then you introduce them to the pro league. That's really cool. I think that's a really smart play on their behalf, and it shows that they kind of really care about the pro league. But that's really cool on their behalf. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that later in a second. But Dallas opens at plus 162. The plus 1.5 is the minus 125, and the over 4.5 is plus 175. Phase minus 225 on the money line, minus 1.5, minus 110. It is hard to bet against Dallas at this point. I, I'm really liking that plus 1.5. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm kind of weirded out how Atlanta. I know we saw them in Major Five just fall flat, but we saw them today sweep New York very handily. So I'm a little surprised that the number on Atlanta minus 1.5 is that short. Actually, I don't know which way it's gonna go in terms of like who's gonna bet it and which price will get more expensive, but I don't know. I kind of think it's a stay away at that price. It seems about right. I actually have Atlanta covering a map and a half about 56% of the time. So that kind of falls in line with that. So yeah, it's tough though. Again, Dallas have been pretty hot the last month or two, month or two of the COD League. They almost won Major Four. They had a pretty good showing at Major Five. And so far so good at Champs. Um, they did come out and win both of their series, first against who was it? Minnesota. They came out and just swept them in the first match, and then came out and beat Toronto today in a game 5, round 11. So props to Dallas for getting here. Now you have the toughest team in the league to go up against. I do think Atlanta will win. What Atlanta showed today was scary. It's kind of, I don't know. It was like refreshing to see. I hate to say that because like we always want underdogs to win, me included. But like seeing Atlanta dominate New York that bad, um, was like kind of fun. Like I don't know, like sweeps are never super fun, but to see Atlanta rebound from what they had done at the last major, I thought was a breath of fresh air. So I think the storyline going into tomorrow is, yeah, obviously whoever wins the Dallas Atlanta match is going to have a huge step up in just winning the entire tournament because you're in the grand final. Then you get to kind of sit back and watch how the rest of the games play out, and then obviously you have prep time for your match on Sunday. It's also kind of interesting because last year we were in this same exact scenario where Atlanta and Dallas, albeit with different teams in a 5v5 much worse game. They were in grand final or the winners final. Dallas pulled out the win, got to the grand finals. Although that was probably a bigger deal last year because that gave Dallas a 1-0 map advantage going into the grand final. Whereas this year, you really don't get any sort of advantage outside of vetoes. Uh, so it's probably less important, but still, you guarantee your spot if you win that match. I do think Atlanta will win. I have them winning it about 73% of the time. That might be a little on the high side, maybe closer to 70. So a 70-30 game. But again, Dallas have looked good. I would not be surprised if they win. Since they've had Vivid on the team for the last couple months, they've looked really hot. It kind of took a little while for them to kind of click, but since they've clicked, Dallas have no doubt been a top 3, maybe even top 2 team in the league. So well deserving to see them here, but we'll see. If Atlanta look like they did yesterday, it's going to be hard to beat them. So I'm excited, but I think more drama could happen in the losers semi, which we'll talk about in a sec.
Yeah, one thing I do want to say about that though is that I worry that we are hyping Dallas far too much from that result against. I mean, sorry, we're having Atlanta. Sorry, far too much against that result against New York, right? Because we'd even said last week. I had originally said there's a very real chance they could go 0-2. They ended up going 1-2 out. So okay, that's fair. And we had said that they had a chance against Optic, and honestly, the model had them as lesser, as like much better than the market did. So it was probably dumb to not bet a +1.5 on them when I think that was plus money early. But at the same time, I like. Is it really that impressive if Atlanta just 3-0s quite possibly the worst of the teams that were playing today, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can only play who is lined up to play you.
No, of
So,
course.
they had no say in it. And you look at the score line and you just watch the games and you go, okay, like Atlanta is back. And yes, it would have been more impressive if they beat, you know, Dallas or Chicago even or Toronto, but that's not the team that fell to them. So, you beat New York by 101 in hardpoint. You beat them by 3 rounds on Miami, which is already a very defensive heavy map. So you're not really going to see a 6-0 or a 6-1. So 6-3 is about how good you can win. And then they 3-0'd them in control. Like, you can't ask for much more. Obviously, yeah, New York then struggled later in the day versus Minnesota. So yeah, the win as a whole for Atlanta, maybe not, quite what I'm thinking in my head as it is, because New York are maybe just a middle of the pack team, and they proved that today. But still, it was just good to see Atlanta rebound the way they did. Dallas, yeah, it's just been a weird kind of champs. Obviously, they've won both of their matches so far. They came out and just destroyed Minnesota in the first match, kind of along the same lines as what Atlanta did to New York today. And then they run up to Toronto, and it's probably the best series of champs so far, and they squeak out a game 5 round 11. They took care of business in the hard points. They are, one of the best hardpoint teams in the league, and their other modes are just about as good. I just worry Atlanta are so good in control. It's just tough to beat them in that mode. And then, if Atlanta just take their hardpoint map and take their search map, there's the win for you. So I'm interested to see if Dallas can pull it out. I think they're more than capable of doing that. They took Atlanta to a game 9 at Major 4. So we'll see if they have that fire in them. I think they could come out. I would be shocked if Dallas win it in 4 games or even sweep Atlanta, because we haven't seen Atlanta get swept all year, and we've only seen them lose in 4 games once, and that was to Minnesota at the last major. So obviously a lot can happen, but man, I don't know. Atlanta just looks so good. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If Dallas come out hot and the price drops on them from a betting perspective, like, they definitely could be the play.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm not blaming Atlanta for. It's like you play who you play, right? And
Yeah.
um, it's it's hard, right? 'Cause you obviously don't control who you play, but at the same time, I mean, this Atlanta team looked like it had problems in the last major, and I think that just to say, oh, okay, they're back now. Which again, to be fair, it's not the point you're saying. They just look good, and that is true. Um, but like it, I don't know. I like that Dallas team looked really good against Toronto. And I think they went what? They won both hard points against Toronto, which is this mode Atlanta has struggled with at times. Remember that's how Dallas took them to the game 9 in Major 4, right? So there are ways that Dallas can find themselves in a game 5 against Atlanta. At that point, then the +1.5 has cashed, and then at that point, then that's when the +1.5 that's the +1.5 is cashed, and then at that point, then your coin flip for the +162, right? So I'll think about it. I don't love it at this price. I wish it was better. Probably will get better. I don't see a ton of Dallas money coming in. I see Atlanta money coming in though when people think that, oh, Atlanta is back. So we'll see what this price looks like
Yeah.
tomorrow,
Yeah.
and we'll go from there. Now the second match that we know of tomorrow is Toronto, Minnesota. No line for this. I will refresh just to check. Still no line for this. My model makes Toronto a -160 favorite. What does yours have?
Yeah, I've got Toronto. It's kind of similar to the Dallas Atlanta spread, although it probably should be a little closer considering how Minnesota's performed lately. Since stage 5, they've been one of the best teams in the league. But yeah, my model has Toronto winning about 71% of the time, which again, right off the rip, seems a little high. Maybe bring that down to 65%, something in that
Yeah, I got
range.
it. I
But
got 62. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, Toronto should be a clear favorite despite Minnesota's recent success, because Toronto, haven't really slowed down. They obviously haven't won a major since Major 2, but they've been in everything they've played. Like, they are, to me, still the clear number 2 team in the league despite losing to Dallas today. Right, the Dallas match went to a game 5 round 11. Like, that's just a straight up coin flip at that point. And they didn't, it didn't go their way. They lost both hard points, which is the mode that they struggle with the most. So you would have liked to see them obviously win the map that they picked, but that didn't happen. They split the searches, and they did take care of control, which again is a really, really good mode for them. But then they took care of business against Chicago. The first couple maps were somewhat of a blowout, and then map 3 they lost the control in, and then they bounced back and won a close raid hard point to close it out. So overall, Toronto, 1-1 on the day. That'll get you to Saturday's matches. They won 3-1. They lost 3-2. So a net positive on total maps won, which is good. And yeah, I think they should be clear favorites over Minnesota. They are clear favorites in your model, it looks like, too. But obviously, don't be surprised if Minnesota come out and win. I was impressed, at least with Minnesota's last game against New York. Again, New York did not look great today, only winning 1 of 7 maps. Couple were close, but yeah. So Minnesota's path, how they got here, not super impressive. I think they're clearly the number 4 team in terms of odds to win the championship as a whole, despite winning the last major. Because they've been improving so far since Champs started. They obviously got smoked by Dallas in the first match. They come down to losers bracket round 1. And we really didn't know how, losing a game earlier in the day would affect those teams. At least on the first day, it didn't really hurt at all. Minnesota took care of Thieves. It did take them a game 5, and the series was very tight, just about every map. Um, so not a super impressive win, but a win nonetheless. And then obviously their matchup today against New York was a pretty convincing win, 3-1. So trending up if you're Minnesota, that's obviously good. But now you have to beat 3 teams that I think are clearly better than you. So it'll be an uphill battle. But we've seen something like this happen before. I feel like Toronto, when they won Major 2, were in a similar scenario where I think everyone kind of thought they were the least likely team to win that major, having to win, 3 straight. Thankfully, the schedule lined up nicely where they could just go back to back to back matches and stay hot, and that ended up, winning for them. But we'll see. It's an uphill fight for Minnesota, but they can definitely do it. Obviously, we saw them do it in Major 5, having won 5 straight to reverse sweep Toronto. So we finally get this matchup. I know you were hoping to see this maybe in winners round 2, but obviously Dallas took out Minnesota right away, so we didn't get to see it. But now we get to see it in loser semis, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, I think Toronto will win. It might take a map 5. But yeah, I really see a Toronto Dallas losers final, which I think won't surprise anybody. But would not be shocked if it was Dallas Minnesota again. And even if it's that, it's another revenge scenario. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's interesting when cause I just realized FaZe and Dallas played in the winners finals of last year's championship too,
Hmm.
and Dallas won it,
Yep.
sent FaZe to losers, and then I believe FaZe took out Optic. Yeah, because Optic took out London, because of
London.
course they
Yep.
did, and then FaZe took out Optic. I think it was a 4-3-1. I think, if I remember correctly. I don't think it was a 3-2, but could have been a 3-2. I don't know, but um, yeah. So, and the
Yeah, I
thing of it
actually think
is,
that was a 3-0, if I remember correctly, because it was like people were wondering how Atlanta would bounce back after getting sent down to losers, and they just smashed Optic, and then
it could have been.
obviously replayed Dallas. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just a weird end of champs last year to see London in there, and like Chicago made it
Well, the
after
thing was that
clutching up
was
against OGLA, and yeah.
against, yeah. Well, the thing of it was that was Toronto London, and that was the time that Toronto had like beaten London most of the times they had played, and like Toronto played London in basically the finals to get to the next week, and then London beat them out, eked them out. I think it was 3-1. It was a 3-1, and that was the thing. And Toronto was the favorite. I think I definitely had Toronto in that game, and then they missed it, and it was sad. But it was
Mhm.
like I think just like Toronto probably should have won, but they just didn't, and then because Toronto in there would have been better, probably put up more of a fight against Optic, but whatever. No, what I'm just realizing now is the fact that Atlanta has clearly been a team built for literally this moment. It was literally they lost last year in the winners finals and then the finals, and they built their entire season around getting to this point. That was the whole reason for getting Arceus and getting rid of Major Maniac and Priest. That was like we're getting to this moment. We need that veteran leadership. We need to be able to win in this literally this game and the next game. Do you think that here's it's either works one of two ways. It's either like this is what they've been waiting for all season and then they pull it off, or they get in their heads. I don't know. I don't know which is more likely, right? I mean, you can make the case that that game one this week was pretty easy. They couldn't get in their heads, but now that they had the success, now they're like, okay, now here we're back to where we were last year. I don't know. It's a very difficult thing to think about, right? As to whether or not that will play. What quick before we move on to other things? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good question because there is a part of me that does worry a little bit about Atlanta just in terms of, if if things go wrong, if things look a little shaky, do they have the composure to stay the course and not fall? And obviously they haven't been perfect this year. They've choked at times. Major 5 was really ugly for them, to be frank. But I think now, yeah, with our cities on the team, it's another year they've been together. The Celium, Abizi, Simp trio. They're a year older. They're still really young, but like they've had more time together and they know that they're like, I don't want to say they're the team of destiny, but like they have had a stranglehold on this league all year up until Major Five. Um, and I think teams saw that they could, falter that much and kind of got excited. And Atlanta was like, okay, like that, like they've had wake up calls throughout the year, but Major Five was by far the biggest wake up call of like, okay, we literally have no other time. Like Champs is around the corner. Let's just figure this out. And like, I think they're gonna pull it out, which is kind of cool and it's kind of disappointing because you never, again, right? The favorite winning is not super fun, but when it's a team that's this dominant, you kind of want to see it. So then they can talk about like, oh, was this, 2021 Atlanta FaZe team the best ever? You can make that argument. They won Major One, they got second at Major Two, they won Major Three, won Major Four, and then obviously collapsed in Major Five. And if you can win champs, it's like, yeah, they gotta be one of the best teams ever, which I think they know that. I think they won't get it in their heads. And you gotta remember with Dallas too, last year's Dallas team was just the perfect combination of players, I thought, because you had two veteran guys holding down the ARs, and you had three young guns. Hook was, a well-established player, but the like delineation of leadership was very clear, and it worked for that team really well, especially on the online era. Now with Crim6 is kind of the lone lead voice. They brought in a new player in Vivid who's been good for them, no doubt. Um, but again, they haven't had a ton of time to gel completely as a group. Now, they've been awesome, since Vivid's joined, but I will take the team that's been together longer, that has shown that they can win. And even when they falter a little bit, like Atlanta is capable of bouncing back in a map or two. Like, when things got a little scary against Dallas in Major Four, they came out and crushed them in Apocalypse Hardpoint to force a game 9, and then they took care of business took care of business on Raid in that final game 9, and yeah, they clutched up, you could say. So that experience I think helped a ton for them. And in that post, champs or post major interview with Arcides, he even said like, "Listen, we played bad and we still won," which was true. Like you watched him play and you go like, "This isn't FaZe," but somehow they still came out on top again with today's match against New York, whatever it's worth. Like they looked good, and I do think they carry that momentum and they take the whole thing. Now, it'll be interesting if they don't, especially if they go lose tomorrow. That would be a shock, I think. But yeah, I'm pretty confident in Atlanta. But you're right, there is that little part of me that says like, I don't know. We'll wait and see. But I don't know if there's another team. Maybe Toronto is a more like gelled together team, just a better unit as a whole. But I don't know. I put them kind of on par with Toronto in terms of like decision making, coaching, strategy, that sort of thing. I just think Atlanta have that plus the talent. So that's why they've been the best team all year.
Yeah, and that's a really important point too of that is that like if they figure it out and they beat Dallas, it's really hard to not see them as the favorites into the
Yeah.
finals. But if they struggle with Dallas, I don't think they get to the finals because the gap between them and the next best team now is a lot. I feel it's a lot smaller than it was between them and Optic last year. Well, sorry, not other Optic Huntsman. The gap between them and Chicago last year is a lot smaller than it is. Was a lot bigger than it is this year between them and then between them and Toronto and Minnesota, right? So that's an interesting thing to see, and I think we'll have to see. I think probably the most likely scenario is a Dallas Atlanta final. After that, probably an Atlanta Toronto final or a Dallas Toronto final, I think is probably the most likely for me. I think. I,
Hmm.
I don't know if I see Minnesota. I know I have the Minnesota at the plus 700. I don't think that's going to cash. I still like want to see Toronto in there, but again, it's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not
The
bad
thing
at
with
all.
Minnesota, and yeah, I don't think we're surprising anyone if we are thinking Minnesota has the least likely chance to win this whole thing. Like, just think about it in terms of it, like, like Minnesota has to beat Toronto and Dallas and Atlanta to win the whole thing. And they have a clear like game mode or map disadvantage against every one of those teams. Like Minnesota's hard point, not great, although they did beat New York twice today. And they crushed them on Garrison, which was New York's like by far best map. So that was surprising. If Minnesota can turn around the hard points, they have a better shot to beat these teams. Minnesota are a good control team. It's just Atlanta and Toronto are the best. And Minnesota's a good search team, but again, the other three are too. It's tough to find advantages if you're Minnesota, but anything can happen. You can, clutch up around 11. You can, clutch up a control at some point. And yeah, if you get a couple good hills and a hard point, like you can chain that. And yeah, if you maybe mix up the map vetoes a little bit, maybe you got a shot. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, they have to get through Toronto first, which is a heck of a fight. One that I'm super excited for, just because again, it's a rematch of that crazy Major 5 final. Wouldn't it be something if Toronto go up again by 2 games and then the talking starts of like, well, Minnesota's only got to win 3 in a row to reverse sweep this, so it's a guarantee. But I think it like the most likely scenario is probably a Toronto 3-1, I would say. And I think Atlanta probably in the same ballpark. I'll take Atlanta 3-1 over Dallas. I'll take a Toronto Minnesota. That would lead to a Toronto Dallas rematch. I do think Toronto will get the revenge on them, maybe in a game 5. And then we see another Atlanta Toronto grand final, which it's crazy to think we've only had one of those this year. We've had 2 Atlanta Dallases, but only 1 Atlanta Toronto. And I'd love to see a rematch of those two again, even though, right, they are the number 1 and number 2 seeds, but for good reason. They are the best 2 teams in the league. We'll see, though. Minnesota could upset Toronto. That wouldn't shock me in any way, but yeah, I'm just really hoping for an Atlanta Toronto final. I say that as a Dallas/Minnesota fan, so I mean, any way it turns out, I'm kind of happy. A Dallas Toronto final would also be interesting. One we haven't seen yet in a major, but again, a match that happened today, so that'd be interesting. But I don't know. I'm just excited to see it play out. I like the 4 teams we have here. I think it's about right. I have Atlanta, Toronto, and Dallas as my 1, 2, and 3 team, and Minnesota and Optic are kind of vying for the 4th and 5th spot. Although after this, I think it might be proof that Minnesota are the 4th best team. So yeah, it's an exciting last couple of days, and I can't wait to see it shake out.
Okay, so I think that will be it for us on the remaining games of the 2021 season. So now we turn our attention to what will happen after, or in the case of Seattle Surge, what happened just hours ago. Seattle Surge has already team wiped their entire roster, including their coach. Maybe some office furniture left too, unconfirmed with that. But no, they've gotten rid of everybody. Which, I mean, to be fair, yeah, that's not really unexpected. Octane a little bit, but if Octane was saying I'm going, then that's it, right? I mean, there's unconfirmed reports that, I mean, again, they said this on Reddit, so you don't want to say it's confirmed, but again, it seems likely that the head office basically didn't want to spend money on the team. They didn't want to get certain players. They didn't want to spend the money and invest in it. So they ended up with what they got, and that's definitely true. And the fact that they even got that marquee win against Atlanta FaZe is actually kind of surprising. So the question now is, let's look at the other teams and let's see where they go from there. And I think the first thing we're going to talk about is actually Optic. I want to bring Optic in at New York because they're the 2 most recent teams we have in our head, right? Because we literally just saw them get knocked out of champs. And I think there's a very important story about Optic there and where Optic goes from here and about them through the regular season. Now we've kind of not talked about Optic. Other people have talked about Optic a lot, and obviously we've talked about Optic with other teams, but some people will talk to you about like the core of Optic and like the core players and what that means keeping them together. And I mean, obviously, we're kind of a more data analytics, so we don't really believe in the whole kind of like, oh, you have to keep this player because it's this player. But I mean, the thing of it is, obviously, Hector has to sit down in the next couple days. If they haven't already had these conversations tonight in the hotel room, I don't know. But when you see the pictures of Scump there when they lost to New York and then when they lost to Toronto tonight, and in not particularly close fashion either, right? I mean, they were down 0-2 to New York, then New York pulls it out in the game 5, then down 3-1 to Toronto, try to pull it back in the game 4, but then again go to a game 5. How's that going to go for you, right? Probably not particularly well. What do they have to do? And I think the question for me comes to what do they want to do? Do they want to just have these fan favorite players, which again, I'm not particularly saying any one of them are bad, but I'm saying that like these are like classic optic players. You're looking at Envoy, you're looking at Dashy, Formal, Scump, right? Who is the core of optic? What are you trying to win, or are you trying to just produce content? And then what does that mean going forward, right? Because here's the thing: if you want to say cool, Scump is the core of the team, and we want to compete, great. Then that means you build around Scump and you find people that specifically work with Scump. If you say no, Scump is an aging star, Leon only has a couple years left. We want to build around another core team. We want to build around, say, Envoy or Dashy or probably not Formal. Formal's up there too. You need to make a decision of who is staying with the team and who is not staying with the team, and you need to go with it. And I think the question is, I think the decision is build on Scump. I think Scump is the kind of the biggest star in the league. I think that's who you build around. I think if you pair him well, I think if you pair him well with, you can pair him well with Envoy. Envoy is a really great player, probably one of the best in the league. But I think that, and I think Dashy is great, but I think Dashy is too inconsistent for a team that can have bad, like Envoy and Scum can have bad games. So you need someone in there that's more consistent. I think if you kind of upgraded AR, if you got Octane, if you got someone else, I don't know, if you got a solid AR and then a solid flex, I think that could be a very dangerous team. But conversely, if you keep Dashy and you put in something like Standy or Hydra or like there's different ways you can build around a team, but I think Optic really needs to pick what team they want to be. And I don't think this Optic team is going to be the same Optic team we see next year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's tough because you're right. You do have to kind of take into account what Optic's priorities are. Because I think they do care a lot about content. Because, I mean, it's important to them. It's important to every org to produce good content. You want to grow your fan base. Obviously, Chicago has the biggest one by far. And if you I don't want to say throw away some of your key players that keep the optic machine running, like that might hurt the fan base a little bit. I do think it's a loyal fan base that'll stick with Hector no matter who's in the lineup as long as Scump's in there, I think people will be happy. I wonder if they'll split up Scump and Formal though. It's tough when so when trying to think about what the roster might look like for next season, and you go player by player and go, okay, what does Optic look like if Scump's not in the lineup? Well, to me, that's like if Derek Jeter wasn't on the Yankees. Like it's just something that's so hard to imagine that like I don't know. It's tough to see. It's like who does Scump want to play with then if Hector doesn't want him back? But again, I just cannot see that. Um, but the other three players I think are up for grabs. I think Dashy's tough because he's been with like the Optic brand for a while now. He was with Optic Gaming Los Angeles, obviously last year, which was a different Optic, but still he's attached to the brand. He is, I think, their best player. You watch him play, and he has some nutty plays with the Krig that only he and we see Celium pull him off. Sometimes we see Octane. Like he is clearly one of the best ARs in the league, if not the best. Um, he's not much of the in-game leader, but that's okay if he is slaying like he does. Like he is a benefit, like he is helpful to your team. So he is tough. Envoy, maybe. I think you can kind of. I think he might be the easiest player to get rid of because I just think there are better subs in the league. And like I don't think Envoy and Scump's, SMG duo chemistry is like through the roof good. Like they're both good sub players, but like if you need to replace Envoy with someone faster or whatever, like if you want to replace him with Standy, like maybe that's something. I don't know what they're gonna do, but Envoy I could see moving on, and then Formal, honestly, like it would be weird to see him and Scump split up again, but Formal has some issues, especially in Search and Destroy, and like I know everyone talks about Major Maniac as like the slowest player in the league, and he is one of the slowest. Formal is like also very, very slow. And it's really hard to watch his POV sometimes because you never know what you're going to get. Like, he'll either play way too slow and then still get killed, as he's holding an angle or something, or like he just isn't all there. Like I don't know, it's tough. And I know he's the in-game leader. You listen to him in the listening, and he's calling out everything. And obviously, like he's kind of the Arcides on that team of just like the slow AR who's just going to call everything on the map and kind of lead the troops. But I don't know. I could see it going a lot of different ways. I can see them sticking it out. I think what would help them a lot if they do decide to stick with this four is broaden your coaches. Like coaching and analytics are a big part of this league. And Chicago, I don't think really have much outside of their head coach and sender. You look at Atlanta FaZe, they have like four coaches. They have one coach just for search and destroy. They obviously have a numbers cruncher, an easy Mac. Like they have a staff, like a coaching staff. Chicago has one guy. I think the players just kind of shot call everything, and Sender's there to like, he's there. Like I don't know. I think more of a focus on analytics, on just getting more voices in the room would help Chicago. But I don't know if they want that. I think they like being like a vibey, just kind of a let's go out and gun these kids kind of a team. So it's really hard to predict what they're gonna do. I think what I would do if I were them is stick out with these four for at least the start of next year, but really commit to, adding another coach or two or just more, data analytics scientist number cruncher dudes and like really dive deep into the game. Like there's more to COD than just VOD review and scrims and all that sort of stuff. And I think just adding more voices would help them a lot. But again, hard to predict what they're even going to do because we don't even know what their priorities are. So that's my long answer for that.
No, and that's really the point, right? They need to sit down and figure out like I mean, honestly, if you're just there for content and the vibes, like it's really frustrating, right? Because they're very clearly a good team. No single person on that team is bad. Like you can't be like this, well, maybe vaguely with the exception of Formal at some points. You can't point to this person. This person is bad. You can't really say that because all of them have pretty historic careers and all of them are pretty good. But the issue is that okay, they're all pretty good, right? And that's the thing. They really need someone to be like they need it's kind of if you're it's like a team that's middling in like the NFL. If you have like a decent quarterback, but he's the fan favorite quarterback, and you got this wide receiver, and the fans really like him, but like he's kind of okay, and you got a couple of cool defensive players, and like you have a running back, but the fans like it's like you need to figure out where if you want to be competitive, you need to figure out who you're getting rid of to get the impact players that's going to take you there to the Super Bowl and to win or on the back end, you need to say, okay, fine, you know what? The fans are happy with it, then we'll go with it. And you know what? If it means we make the playoff every year and we lose in the first round and maybe we get to the divisional round, who cares, right? Because the fans are happy, we're making a ton of money, the team's happy, everybody's great, right? We'll never win that Super Bowl, but everybody's happy, so it's a win-win, right? We get great content, right? And that's the thing. They need to figure out what they want to do, and it's a hard decision, and you need to sit down with if you decided Scump's the heart of the team, which I suspect they have, then you need to sit down with Scump and be like, what are we doing here? Are and again, he's even said he might be retiring soon, right? And he had been extremely concerned about the sledgehammer producing a new game because he had had a really really bad World War II, and I completely understand that because he did have like they all struggled in World War II. Optic as an organization struggled in World War II, and I think that part of the I mean I think that was kind of the sledgehammer engine. I think that if you're now basically they're using the Modern Warfare engine, which they had a much better Modern Warfare. I mean they made top four, right? So I think if you make the right choices, you make a couple of good additions, and again, yeah, you're right. Coaching could actually very much matter at it, right? Because how many times did we get to an Optic game and there was a very questionable map veto when they played a map that they clearly should not have played against a team on, right? How many times did that happen where it's like, why are you playing this map against this other team, right? And I remember early on in the season they lost to New York because they just ego chowed them on Crossroads, right? Because they'd beaten some other team on Crossroads, and they're like, "Oh, we like that map. We'll challenge New York on that map," and then they just get slaughtered on it, right? Because their vetoes weren't there. Like I mean, you build in map vetoes, right? Like you tell people like, your model says, "Hey, they should play this map and this map," right? Or well, you have that data, right? Like you'd be better at picking their map vetoes than they would, right? Like this is the thing, right? Like if you have this analytics, if you look at where players should be playing instead of just letting them vibe out, I think you can maybe make a better team, but I think there needs to be some other material roster change, and I don't know where that's coming from. Now the next one I want to look at is New York. I think there is a very non-zero chance that New York could get a squad wipe as well. What do you think about that?
Wow.
What do you think about that
I
idea?
Ooh. I haven't really thought about New York yet. I can see Clayster obviously going to a different team because he does that every year just about. Um, I don't know. The New York fan base is a good one. Like subliners have a lot of support, and I think this year especially they've kind of done a good job in like establishing what their identity is, like what their team is. I think like getting Hydra was a big deal. He came into the league. He's been one of the best SMGs, since he's joined. I think they'll probably try to keep him. Asim was a surprise add to the roster. I can see them moving on from him if they want, but I don't know. He works really well with Hydra. Like if you don't want to break up that SMG duo, I get it. I totally get it. Mac, he's been with the team since Modern Warfare. They brought him on last year, and he like catapulted them from being like a bottom four team to a like top four, top five team. Like the improvement that they showed last year, albeit with a completely different roster, was very notable just because they added Mac. And I think he's been solid this year. He's had to flex a lot where, he's running an SMG half the time, he's running an AR half the time. He's been on a lot of different rosters, with obviously earlier this year they had Diamond Con, they brought him back late in the year. They had Decimate, at one point. They've shuffled things around. Mac's kind of been consistently there, so he's had to deal with quite a bit, and I think he's done an admirable job. But if Clayster leaves, I think that I don't know what's going to happen if that's the case, and I kind of think Clayster does want to leave, just with kind of the drama that unfolded in Stage 5 and a not so great showing at Champs. Top 6 is fine, but they probably would have liked at least top 4, if not, to make it to Sunday, but that didn't happen. So if Clayster leaves, it's like, do you hold those three together, Hydra, Asim, and Mac, and then find a fourth? The tricky thing is like, who's your fourth then? Do you bring on do you try to get Octane? If Optic drops one of their ARs, do you try to pick up that guy? I don't know. So New York's a tough one. If Clayster's willing to come back, though, I do think they might just keep the whole team. Um, but yeah, it's tough because it seems like every team makes at least one roster move unless you're an elite team. Like I can't see Atlanta changing. Um, Dallas, Toronto, I can't really see changing. Dallas maybe, but probably not. So I don't know. It's tricky, but I think they've established themselves at least somewhat for it to be an honest question of will New York blow it up? I tend to think no. Um, but if Clayster's really adamant on like I don't want to play for you guys, then I think you could have a scenario where they just go, all right. everybody but Hydra, bye bye. Or maybe Hydra and Max stay, ASIM goes, something like that. It could really be anything. So you're right. They could blow it up. I would be pretty surprised if that was the case, though.
The only thing with that is how long was Hydra's contract? That's the question. We don't. Again, apparently, you can't report on Call of Duty. Apparently, we don't. There is no Adam Schefter of the CDL. The closest thing we have is CDL into who's very great, but is not Adam Schefter. So, for anybody who doesn't know, Adam Schefter is this guy from ESPN who just tweets out all the NFL news before people know about it. Everybody has him on like their Twitter notifications because he gives like if he tweets out something, it has massive impacts on the league and fantasy and betting. So
Hmm.
if you're an NFL fan, follow Adam Schefter. But no, I mean the thing of it is the question is how long do they have the contract for Hydra? Did they really like Hydra, or was the fact they picked up Hydra because Clayster said picked up Hydra? Because when he literally last summer he's like Hydra's the best, like one of the best challengers players in the world. We should get him, like I want to play with him, and then all of a sudden, oh look, here we go, here's Hydra, right? And that's not to say Hydra is bad. Obviously, Hydra is definitely one of the best players in the league. Definitely has a possibility if he had been playing the entire year. He's been a little inconsistent the last couple of weeks, last couple stages and stuff. But if he'd been playing all year, definitely could have been a potential candidate to take out Insight as Rookie of the Year. But um, definitely not a definitely not a safe. Definitely the thing is, I think Clayster goes to Dallas. I think they make room for him in Dallas. I think they get rid of Vivid and they put Clayster in there at Dallas because that was kind of fulfilling the trade that they wanted mid-season. I think then I think Asim will, because I think there's been, I think if you're New York management, because like this team came together at the last second, right? Like everything fell apart. You kind of ended up stuck with this team, right? Because originally this team was supposed to be like Clayster, Zuma, I
Hydra
guess,
and Mac.
Hydra,
Yeah.
and Mac. And then you couldn't get Zuma fell through, so you're like, okay, fine, we'll get ASIM, and then we couldn't get Hydra in time, so we'll put Diamond Con in, and then Zuma's still out, and then you put Diamond Con in, and you go that way. It's a weird. I don't know if that's the team they wanted. I could see like a team win. Maybe they hold on to Mac, maybe they don't. I'm not the biggest fan of Mac. That's been pretty clear the entire time. He's good, but again, when he was really good in that stage three, he was dropping like a massive KD, and that really helped them. That really got them to be competitive in that stage three. But past then, he like when he's not competitive, this team sucks, and it kind of feels like he's the X factor for this team. And if he's the X factor for this team, what's that say about the rest of the team, right? I mean, there's clearly some problem between Clay and Asim, right? That they aired out in public. Now, again, maybe they patched up just to beat Optic one last time. Um, but then, I mean, Asim sucked during the last couple series. He did not have a great last couple days. Definitely a spot in the league for Asim, 100%. Love Asim as a player, but I think there's very clear team chemistry issues. If Clay's gone, I think they get rid of Asim, maybe even get rid of Mac. And then the question is, what do they do about Hydra? I think Hydra will definitely find a home, but the question is, will it be with New York? And I think if everybody's just falling apart, they'll just leave. They'll just team wipe it, and then they'll bring in like I don't even know who they'd bring in. They'll probably bring something in, but
Methods.
well, he'll find. He's another one. I kind of think him and TJ are a package deal. I think they are
Hmm.
friends. They've been longtime friends. Basically, the second TJ got cut from uh, Thieves, they basically signed him. Well, I'm not sure if you sign people in challengers. I think you just add people to a DM and then you're on the same challengers team. I think they added him to their challengers team and they have Slack there too. I suspect it's like that's basically an old. It's basically a team of pros. So I suspect that that team could, and I think they have Decimate too. That team could basically just be a pro team. And like if you're Seattle or you're LAG, even Paris to some extent, or New York, like that might just be a team you just sign. You're like, cool, we'll take them all four of them. That's just a pro team next year.
Yeah,
That's
maybe. I don't know. It's tricky to figure out. I was going to ask you, if Clay does leave New York, which the more I think about it, the more likely I think that might happen. What team do you think he goes to? And yeah, I think Dallas is the right answer. I don't know if, yeah, maybe, yeah, you add Clayster, drop Vivid. That's what you were thinking. I can see that happening.
you
Move
just
Illy to
recreate
a
the old
sub.
you recreate the old
Yeah,
roster.
yeah, that might work. Because I think Illy, I don't know. I'm trying to think like if next year's game is more like Modern Warfare, I'm trying to remember if Illy was better like running an MP5 versus an M4. I think he was pretty similar running both. Same with this year with the Krig and AK-74U. Like I don't think he's significantly better with either gun. So you pair him up with Shotzi and let him run around with SMG, and you have Krim and Clay on the back line. I think that could be really good. So that would be very intriguing if that happens. Another guy to throw in there, and I know we're kind of talking about New York now, but as we talk about Dallas too, Hook, like what's his situation going to be? Is he going
Yeah.
to play a different game? I have no clue. And then you think about the other players, right? I brought up Methods. He's worthy of a roster spot if we get expansion teams, which we probably will. Um, and yeah, you remember, TJ and a lot of challengers players that had a shot this year that couldn't stick. Like it'll be interesting with Rostermania. I do think last year we saw more movement just because there was the switch from 5v5 to 4v4. So I think we get less blowups than last year, but I do think we're still going to get a lot of shuffling around. It's just really tough for me to imagine like the best of the best switching anything like Atlanta, Toronto. I really don't see changing anything. Even if Atlanta disappoints and, ends champs in third place or whatever. But I don't know. Yeah, Chicago, it's tough to see what they're going to do. New York, you're right. They could blow it up. I don't know. It's Minnesota. What are they going to do with, they've really improved the last couple of months. Do they try to stick it out? Um, Maybe Minnesota are interesting to me because they feel like last year's Toronto team, like a team that's really come on late in the year. After a couple of roster changes, Toronto all last year was like, they were making a roster change every month, and finally at the end of the year, it kind of worked out. Um, and they did win like a major tournament, their own home series last year. So yeah, Minnesota feel like last year's Toronto team, which got a lot of flack going into this year because it was like they didn't really change the roster at all. And everyone's like, okay, Toronto, they didn't change anything. They'll be a, top 6 team at best. When in reality, like, no, they figured it out with the players they had and they committed to it. So I can see Minnesota just sticking with what they got. And then all the other teams, like Seattle blew it up. I think London will change a lot. Paris, I don't even know if they're going to be a team. Like there's a lot of question marks with those guys. LA Thieves will shuffle up a lot. There's a lot of shuffling to do, plus expansion teams that like I don't even know how to predict everything because it's going to be a mess.
Uh,
But
L-
it's exciting because it'll happen soon.
yeah,
So
LA Thieves is they've done so many roster moves. I'm surprised they just haven't made one already, just out of habit. They're just like, all
yeah,
right, we're just gonna put Hook back on and put John to the bench. It's like, but you're not playing anymore. It's like, well, we have to make a roster move. We have to. It's been 3 weeks. Actually, you made an interesting point about comparing Minnesota to Toronto, and that was one of the things I wanted to mention here too. If you're Minnesota, you're the general manager of Minnesota. Let's say I mean, at this point, you're already top 4 at champs. Let's say you even win tomorrow, and let's evaluate it from these different scenarios, right? So say you lose tomorrow against Toronto. Say you lose tomorrow in the losers finals, and then say you win or you lose in the finals slash win. So there's kind of 3, 4 different scenarios. Again, a lot of kind of similar outcomes in those basically. Do you keep all 4 of them? And specifically, there's one person I'm kind of referring to when I'm talking. Do you keep Major Maniac? Or do you replace Major Maniac? What are your thoughts on that? Do you see them keeping like if you're the general manager, would you keep Major Maniac or would you try to change him up?
yeah. I don't think there's much of a difference if they finish fourth versus if they finish third. Um, like if they lose to Toronto, I think it's not much different than beating Toronto and then losing to Dallas, who you already lost to, 2 days prior, or running into Atlanta and getting steamrolled or something like that. I don't think there's much of a difference with that. If they do make the finals, the grand finals, I think it's really hard to like make the argument that you should change anything. Maybe if they get like 5-0'd, like if they actually get swept in this in this grand finals, then maybe you start to go like, ooh, like okay, it was really good, and then that's how we ended our year. But in all honesty, yeah, I mean, Major, yeah, he makes the most sense for any sort of move because I think you have to keep Standy. He's just, I mean, since he's joined the team, Minnesota has been better, like just very clearly better. And you watch him on the map and you go like, okay, this kid can like do some stuff on the map that other people can't. Um, Attach is a reliable SMG. I think if the team likes him, they'll keep him. And I think the team does like him. He's a good in-game leader for an SMG. And his numbers, I think, are better than what people think they are. He's a really good control player, and he's very solid in hardpoint and in search. So I think that SMG duo works out well. Priesta is interesting because he can go hot and cold pretty fast. Um, I think right now he's hot, and you like to see that. And then Major Maniac, again, I think he's just that AR on the team that's going to play really slow, and he's going to shot call a lot of stuff. And I think Minnesota maybe, I don't want to say more than any team because I think Toronto probably does it the most, where there's just everyone is talking and everyone's the in-game leader. I think Minnesota is a close second where there's really not like one guy shot calling everything, but I think Major is kind of the leader when it comes to that. So if his numbers are down, that's probably why. But you're right, like he's a slow player for an AR player. His KD should be pretty high. It's not. He doesn't have a ton of engagements every game. So it's like he's not doing much outside of shot calling and like holding objective and that sort of thing. Watching sightlines, he's a great search player. Like you watch him in a search and destroy, and he is always looking the right way. Um, and Minnesota are a great search team in large part to him. So it's tricky. I don't know. Minnesota blew it up last year with their roster just because it falled apart so badly. Like Minnesota was such a good team early in the year, and then I think they lost 10 straight to end the year. And we're like, yep, we're just gonna nuke this whole thing. And they brought in a really solid lineup. Not now, this isn't the lineup they thought they were gonna have at the end of the year, right? The lineup at the start was accuracy, Major Maniac, Priesta, Attach. And yeah, it's a little different now with Standy in for accuracy, but I think we've seen enough with them where they're gonna say like, we're not gonna blow it up again. I think we found something legit with this team. So maybe you're right. Maybe they sub out Major for another AR, but um, I'm okay if they want to just run it back with what they have. I think they have good coaches. They dive deep into the numbers and do excellent VOD review, and they've improved a lot over the course of the year, which shows a lot. So I don't know. I'll say Major stays, but it's close to a 50-50 for me for sure.
I'm gonna make a very potent NFL comparison here. And when I say it, you're going to immediately understand it. You're going to realize that it's basically the same situation. In 2017, the Kansas City Chiefs traded up to 10th overall to draft Patrick Mahomes, and then the next year eventually benched their starting quarterback Alex Smith. Um, that is kind of the exact same thing I feel like Minnesota is in the situation with Major Maniac. I'm I'm slowly for the end for the Call of Duty League. I'm slowly starting to see the ARs as quarterbacks, and like kind of the AR like the SMGs as kind of wide receivers. That like the ARs open up the plays, and then it opens up the plays for the wide receivers. And I think that if your quarterback is not like I kind of feel like the AR is really the most one of the most important players on the team. And I think that even though Major Maniac's a good AR and that you can surround him by good SMGs, I think that if he's not, I think that I think there's a theoretical ceiling with Major Maniac on this team. I think you've got a great team with Priesta, Attached, Standy, and I think that because the AR has been the issue for this team all year, right? Because originally they opened up with Major Maniac and accuracy on the as the AR slash flex, and then that didn't work. So then they brought in Standy, and then they benched Major Maniac, and then they had accuracy be the AR, but then that didn't work out. So they had to swap in Major Maniac, and it's worked better. but it's not been perfect. And I kind of think it's the same kind of situations as the Chiefs with Alex Smith. They were a good team with Alex Smith, kept making the playoffs, couldn't win though. But with Patrick Mahomes, they've now been to two Super Bowls, right? And they've won one, right? So I think that I honestly think it's a very similar comparison, and I think that if you're not in this to win it, if you're like, I think that there's a better AR than Major Maniac available. I think you take it, and I think that if you do that, then you raise the ceiling of this team even higher. Because Priest is a good AR. Well, he's a really great player. You've got Standy, who's amazing. Attach is a very solid player, but AR was a constant thorn in the side of this team all year. And I think my concern for this team is even if they win champs, I still don't think they should keep Major Maniac. If I'm the GM, I think you move Major Maniac and you replace him with an AR. And this is kind of where the hunt for Octane is going to come in, and we'll mention this now because I think we've mentioned what, four teams in this podcast that we could see him on Optic, but as a game replacing as a replacement for Dashy if they want to move Dashy. We can see him on New York if they completely rebuild. We've now mentioned him on. I've now mentioned him on Minnesota. Could you imagine a Minnesota team of Octane, Priestess, Standy, Attach? Could you imagine that?
That would be good. I'm trying to think of other ARs. Like since you've been talking, I've run through other ARs I could maybe see on Minnesota, and Octane seems to make the most sense. At first, I was like maybe Clayster, and then I was like no, because you don't want that like dictator type AR
Yeah,
with guys like this. You want Clay with young guys he can control.
and the
And
best
then I thought of
part.
Slasher, and I was
Mhm,
like, he's too similar. Octane, I think, might vibe really well with those guys, but it's tough. There's slim pickings on ARs. I feel like
like
maybe
quarterbacks.
Florida gets rid. Yeah, maybe Florida gets rid of one of them, but it's like I don't know. I kind of see Florida staying with Skies. He's been a good player for the last 2 years. Awakening's been solid. Neptune maybe goes, maybe Havoc goes, but I think they like their ARs enough to keep both. And then, yeah, you look around the rest of the league, and it's like, I don't know what else there is. So, yeah, if they could get Octane, I think that would be a big catch.
Well, this is the thing, right? And I think and remember what I've said about Octane is that he cannot be the best player on the team. Hilariously against Atlanta, that was Classic. Classic was the best player on their team. But no, this is the thing, right? And he would fit perfectly in there because he's got Priest at any given game. Priest can be the best player on the map. Standy could be the best player. Attach could even be the best player on the map, right? Octane needs to be in a very he's a very good player, but he needs to have the pressure taken off him. He can't just be the only good player on the map for the team the entire time. And Gunless was able to do that with him in Seattle. But honestly, and actually now, and I'm not even mentioning Gunless could be a good opening on some of these teams as well. He could definitely provide help to some of these teams as well. So but no, like Octane would make a lot of sense on a Minnesota. Now, getting into Thieves, and this is kind of, I think, the last one we'll talk about, because outside of Thieves, I think the rest of them are basically squad wipes. And LAG is an expected squad wipe. Paris is expected. I think London will probably hold on to um, Paul X and Afro.
Afro, maybe? Yeah.
They'll
Yeah.
hold on to them. They were looking at getting Zero. They could probably get some. The thing is now that they'll have a whole off season, and they can do stuff with visas, they can probably get more players. So that's not really a big deal. I think they can probably work around that. I think now they kind of know the way the format of this is going to work. I mean, here's the thing, we don't know what this is going to look like in a year. If they're smart, they'll build it around the fact of, oh, okay, let's make sure we have enough players in the US, period, so that we can, because I'm not 100% sure that the world is going to be able to just completely open up in like 2 months. Like I think that we might start seeing some closures of some stuff kind of around Christmas time. Um, but again, let's just hope that we can let's hope that the management of Paris and London is smart enough to realize the way this is going. Um, but and outside of that, I think Florida could also be. I don't know what Florida's another interesting case too, but it's just chaos there because this team clearly was super high variance, and that variance was just not paying off the last stage and champs. And the question is, like, Neptune was good, okay. Awakening struggled at times, okay. But like Skies was good but not great. Havoc not great. Slack, not great.
Skies was really good towards the end of the year.
Yeah, but then at that point it
Awakening,
was
I
kind
think,
of
fell off
wasted
a
though.
little bit, but
That's the thing, because it
yeah,
was wasted
yeah.
because of Awakening, right? So the question is, do you keep the same team? Do you just wipe the team and just start over with a fresh set of people? Because if you're stuck in a team with super high variance, and again, it depends on what you want, right? Florida is this kind of memey team, so if they're like, yeah, we could be the like, if you want a team, and especially if there's more events, if you want a team that can go on like some insane losers bracket run and just sweep the thing, then yeah, 100%. Just crank that up. Find a replacement for Havoc, and you're great, and you're good. But on the flip side, if you want a consistent team that can continuously win and continuously get that prize money, you probably want to make a couple changes. And I'm not sure what's causing that variance. Maybe it is Awakening. Maybe Awakening is a better fit somewhere else. Maybe it's, I don't know. There's lots of different pieces to look at that. But I think, and again, that's a really complicated question that we'll probably have to deal a lot more with internally in Florida. But I think the last team I kind of want to look at is LA Thieves, because where does this team go from here? Because they've got Slasher, they have TJ under contract. I believe they still have TJ under contract, but I don't see him playing for the team again. They've got Draza, they got Slasher, Draza, Kenny, and John. John has not looked great at times. Do they try to get Octane? But Octane's bounced around the league, right? Like he's never really stayed in one place. Just because he played on Hundred Thieves before, it doesn't mean he's just gonna fit in back in Thieves. He could end up in Thieves, and if we're all gonna, I'm gonna sound really stupid if he just says I'm going back to Thieves because I liked it there. We did great. That's good. And again, if Priesta decides to stay at Minnesota, great. If Priesta then theoretically decides to leave, then Thieves could start looking really dangerous, right? It depends on Priesta's deal. But what do you try to do? Honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of Slasher. I think Slasher is way too high variance. This team was super high variance the entire year too. Draza is good. If Thieves don't want to play Draza goes somewhere else in the league. Definitely for sure. He should have gotten a spot this year. I was on a different team, but the Thieves put him in as the sub. Kenny, obviously one of the best ARs in the league. Like what do you if you're Thieves, what are you trying to do this offseason? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to how do you fix this team and get it ready for next year?
Yeah, I think the question if you're Thieves is who should we build around? And maybe it's not the right question because I think you could keep Slasher and Kenny. I don't see them keeping John. I honestly don't really see them keeping Draza, although he's been an asset to the org, since they added him late in Modern Warfare, when they were Optic Gaming. But I can see them moving on from him as well because, like, he's a good player, not great. With it's tough, right? Because like adding Octane would be nice, I think. And I think Octane would really want to go to LA Thieves. I think of every org he could go to, he wants to go back to Thieves the most. Um, but it's tricky, right? Because I think obviously Octane is an AR, Slasher's an AR, and Kenny can do both, but I feel like he's much better on an AR. And you don't want to have three AR players and one SMG. Now, we don't know the next game, maybe that's the meta. Probably not. We probably get another like 2-2 split. Um, or if anything, three SMGs, one AR.
Well, the only reason that
But
worked in Black Ops 4 was because it's 5v5. Now in 4v4, it's very unlikely you get
right.
three ARs. Yeah.
Right. So you'd have to put Kenny on an SMG or some sort of flex weapon or something if that's the case. So I don't know. It could come down to like I think Kenny stays because he is versatile. And he is kind of the face. I know people think of Slasher, but I mean, Slasher was off the team for quite some time throughout the middle portion of the year. Kenny's been on the team the entire year and last year, even with all those roster moves. Kenny's been kind of the stable force, and he's a good player. I think the fans want him there. Slasher, I don't know. He might retire. We don't really know. It would be odd to see him go too, though. So maybe they can work if they have all three guys, Octane, Slasher, Kenny. Um, but it might work better if it's just like Kenny and Octane and Slasher goes somewhere else. I don't know where he would go, but I don't know. It's tricky with Thieves. Again, everything they do is unpredictable. And like you're right, they might make a roster move tomorrow and think that they're playing next weekend, and then it's like, oh wait, you guys are out or something. But I don't know. It's tough with Thieves. I think the biggest question mark teams, in terms of like, besides the teams that are going to blow it up and we have absolutely no clue what they're going to do, the interesting teams to think about, I think, are Thieves, New York, and probably Chicago, even though they might not do anything. Because if they do anything, it will be interesting too. But New York and LA Thieves, I really think a lot depends on. With New York, like Clayster, I think is obviously the key cog, and then with Thieves, it's like, are you okay bringing in Octane or someone else? Because you have to make some sort of change again, despite them being the league leader in roster moves already. But we'll see. It'll be an interesting couple of weeks. I imagine a lot of this will get sorted out. Post champs. Maybe we do one more podcast once things have settled, or before Vanguard gets released or something. But right now, we got still 4 more matches at champs. I will kick back and relax and watch those over the next couple of days, and then I'll keep refreshing my Twitter feed over the next, I don't know, weeks to months to see all the roster moves.
Yeah, just put CDL Intel on notifications. Done.
Yeah.
Easy. That's what I've done. I got a lot of people on notifications for like news on stuff. So one more quick note on these though. It's very clearly Nade Shot is doing a lot of this stuff. Because like if you're an owner, right? He's a young owner who's played in the league, right? You think of NFL owners, right? You think of like you're you're Robert. I think it's Robert or Ryan Kraft. I can't remember. I think it's Robert Kraft.
Robert.
Robert Kraft,
Yeah.
owner of the New England Patriots. You look at Jerry Jones, owner of the Dallas Cowboys, right? These guys are older. These guys know what they're doing. They're not going to rush out and make an impulsive move just to try to win because that's not how the NFL works, right? You have a bad season in the NFL, great. You get a high draft pick. That's a good thing, right? That doesn't work in the CDL, right? And Nate Shot is definitely in the I spent money to buy this team. I want to compete and win now. And I think that that is part of the issue with it. And I think that if you're Nate Shot, I think it's the mark of a young owner and one that doesn't completely trust his entire team and possibly even coaching staff in which they have to keep making all these changes. And I think that's an important thing to think of going forward. I think he thinks in his mind if he just makes the right tweak or the right change somewhere, then bam, all of a sudden we're competitive and we're winning champs, right? And I think that if they hadn't have done that, I mean, at one point they had a really good roster. They had the roster I really liked was Kenny, Draza, Venom, and who was the other one? And they had another
Uh,
one.
yeah.
Was it TJ?
TJ.
Was it TJ
Yeah.
on that?
TJ and Venom were the sub duo, and Draza and Kenny were the ARs.
Yeah, okay. I like that team.
Yeah.
And then even when they replaced it with Hook, I also like that team. But then Slasher complained, and then we had to put Slasher back on the team because they lost a couple of games, and then we put Hook off because he forgot his name. He forgot how to spell his name. Like, there's been so many issues where, and to be honest, I kind of think at that point they kind of had to move Hook off because I think he was becoming more of a problem more of a negative than a positive at that point. But I think it's very clearly the mark of a young. Because like the question for Nate Shot is like, okay, if you didn't like this team, then why was this the team going into the year? Why weren't changes? Why did you do these changes before the year? Right? Like it shows that he was not confident in this team, and I think either he's learned his lesson of the you can't build Rome in a day, and he's going to just kind of incrementally build this team up and then maybe get some challengers players or whatever, or he's going to go just spend a ton of money getting Octane, right? And he'll get Octane and he'll buy out Priesta's contract. Like it really depends on what he wants to do. If he feels the best way to compete in this league is to build a super team to take down FaZe, sure, right? That's what he'll do. Or if he thinks that no, we can build it, and I mean, I think on some level, I think we kind of already know the way he's going to go. I think by saying this way, we think we know the way he's going to try to implement this, right? So a lot of very interesting questions about a lot of teams. Um, and yeah, we will definitely look at that going forward. I think what I said at the top of the podcast is this is the last one for the 2021 season. That I think is true. This closes the book on the 2021 season. But yeah, definitely, we might have another podcast. And I think that would be the first podcast of the 2022 season. So there we go. Once we get more details about Vanguard, Rostermania, once maybe we get a bunch, because we're probably gonna like I if we get to next week, if we get to this time next week, and Octane is not on a team, someone should get fired. Someone in some office should be fired because
Yeah.
they are clearly not
Yeah.
doing their job right. So, no, there could be a lot of roster moves in the next week. And also, if there's gonna be expansion in this league, we should know. Like, we probably should know by the end of this weekend, legitimately. Like,
Honestly,
if
yeah.
they're smart about it, they should come out like those. They should announce the orgs on the final day of champs. Is what they should do, and they're just holding it. They're holding it. They're holding it. They're holding it, and they're just gonna wow people with it on champs. So that's a possibility because again, remember they're doing the multiplayer reveal for Vanguard on champs, and I think that's a really cool thing that they're doing. It's a great way to get people who normally wouldn't care about the CDL involved in it too. I also think the Warzone event. I'm not sure. Did you get a chance to play the Warzone event?
I have not played Warzone in so long, Robert. I am so far behind on what's even gone down. Verdansk kind of changed or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds about
It's
right.
crazy.
No, they had an event. I had a meeting I had a meeting like immediately after the event, so I definitely didn't play it. But I watched people on Twitch play it though for my meeting, and basically it was really cool because what it did was it basically introed Vanguard. It basically was everybody spawned into a Warzone lobby and everybody was on the same team, and they just had to destroy a train that was had like basically infinite health. It was kind of weird, but at the same time, and I'll just throw this out there, it's really cool that they figured out how to get everybody on the same team because that opens up the possibility that like in the future they could just put everybody onto the Warzone map and then just spawn zombies in. That sounds fun.
Ooh, yeah, okay.
Because I've been ever since the Warzone Zombies event, I kind of thought I thought that's what the Warzone Zombies event was gonna be, but then they just ended up with this. But if they figured out how to get everybody on the same team, then they could definitely create Warzone Zombies with that. But anyway, that's just a thought I had, and that seems like definitely something they're planning. But anyways, no, it's really great that they're kind of expanding this out, and I think that this is why they bought this. This is why they bought the COD World League out, right? Because they wanted to set up an environment where they can advertise on both and they can launch their own stuff and control it in house. Instead of having to go to E3, spend money on a booth and a presentation, and we don't need to do that anymore. We can advertise it on a YouTube stream, and then oh yeah, by the way, here's Championship Sunday for the COD League. If you like Call of Duty, just stay tuned. You're gonna get to see two really good teams play off against each other, right? So the important thing that might take away from that is, although it's all really cool, it means that they care about the COD League. It means that they're not abandoning this thing. They've taken some hits on sponsorships because of the sexual assault lawsuit. Not sexual assault, sexual misconduct lawsuit. Um, but yeah, no, this is they care about this league and they're gonna try to build it up. And I think this is kind of the cornerstone of they're trying to make this a cornerstone of Call of Duty going forward. So it means that there will be many more years of the COD League and many more years of the Call of Duty betting podcast. So thank you everybody for joining us on year one of this podcast. You will hear from us again. Don't worry about that. And have a good weekend of champs. And yeah, we will see you. We'll see you soon. See you, everybody.